The year was 2147 when humanity first heard the voices from the stars. And everything changed forever in ways that no one could have predicted at that moment in history. A massive ship appeared above Earth without any warning, blocking out the sun over the Atlantic Ocean and causing panic in every nation on the planet. And military forces around the world prepared for what they believed would be the end of human civilization as they knew it, but the aliens did not attack. And instead, they sent a simple message that said they came in peace and wanted to meet the leaders of this small blue world. The creatures called themselves the Valith, and they were part of something much bigger called the Galactic Concord, which was a union of hundreds of alien species spread across thousands of star systems. And they had been watching Earth for many years before deciding to make contact. Every species in the Concord had one thing in common when they were first discovered, and that was violence. Every single one of them had attacked the Concord ships that found them, fighting with everything they had until they were defeated and forced to join the galactic communities. So the Concord expected the same from humanity, and they brought warships hidden behind their diplomatic vessel, ready to crush these primitive beings if they showed any sign of aggression. But humanity did something that shocked every alien who was watching. They did not fight, and they did not threaten, and they did not show any fear or hatred toward these strange visitors from another world. Instead, Earth sent diplomats who smiled and offered handshakes to beings with claws and tentacles and forms that looked like nightmares. And the humans acted as if meeting aliens was the most wonderful thing that ever happened to them. The Concord representatives did not know what to make of this behavior, and they reported back to their governments that humans were either very stupid or very strange, because no species had ever welcomed them with such warmth before. Over the next several months, humanity shared everything they had with their new galactic neighbors, and they gave them music that made some aliens weep with emotions they had never felt before. And they shared art that showed beauty in ways that other species had never imagined. Human scientists worked alongside alien researchers with excitement and curiosity, asking questions about the universe that the Concord had stopped asking thousands of years ago. And human philosophers engaged in debates that made ancient alien scholars feel young again. The Galactic Concord had seen many species join their union, but they had never seen anything quite like humanity before. What confused the aliens most was how dangerous humans actually were on a physical level, because Earth was what the Concord classified as a Category 9 death world, which was almost the highest danger rating possible for any planet. Everything on Earth seemed designed to kill, from the bacteria that could eat through metal to the predators that hunted in packs with terrifying intelligence. And the weather systems alone were violent enough to destroy entire cities to survive on such a world. Humans had evolved into something remarkable without even realizing it. Their reflexes were faster than most species in the galaxy. Their bones were denser. Their immune systems were adaptive nightmares that could fight off almost any disease. And their endurance was legendary. A human could chase prey for hours without stopping, could survive injuries that would kill most aliens instantly, and could adapt to almost any environment within a few generations. They were, by every measure, one of the most physically dangerous species the Concord had ever encountered, and yet these deadly creatures from a death world wanted nothing more than to be friends with everyone they met. The Valith High Command studied humanity for 10 years before reaching their conclusion, and they decided that humans were weak in spirit despite their strong bodies, that their love of peace was a sign of cowardice rather than choice, and that they could be easily controlled or destroyed if it ever became necessary. "They are soft," the Valith Lord Commander declared to his council, "and soft things break easily when pressure is applied to them. Remember this for the future." Meanwhile, Humanity was given permission to establish colonies on 3 worlds at the edge of Concord space, and millions of humans volunteered to leave Earth and build new homes among the stars, dreaming of a future where their children would grow up beneath alien suns. The largest colony was called Ashenvale, named after a forest on Earth that the first settlers remembered from their childhood. And it was built on a beautiful green world with 2 moons and skies that turned purple at sunset within 20 years. Over 4 million humans called Ashenvale their home, and they built cities that blended human architecture with alien designs, creating something new and beautiful that had never existed before. In the galaxy, children were born on Ashenvale who had never seen Earth, and they grew up thinking of this alien world as their true home, playing in parks and going to schools and dreaming of futures full of possibility. The human colonists traded fairly with every species they met, never trying to cheat or deceive anyone, and they welcomed alien visitors to their world with the same warmth that Earth had shown to the first Concorde ship's other species in the Concorde began to call humanity by a nickname that spread across the galaxy like a whisper. And that name was the Polite Ones. It was not meant as a compliment. The aliens used this name with amusement and sometimes with contempt, because politeness was seen as weakness in a galaxy that had been forged by war and conquest. And many species believed that humanity would eventually learn this lesson the hard way, but humans did not care what others thought of them. And they continued to smile and shake hands and build schools and hospitals and farms, believing that kindness would eventually change the hearts of even the coldest beings in the universe. They were wrong about that, and the lesson would cost them everything far away in Veilous space. Military commanders were already looking at maps and marking Ashenvale with red circles, calculating how much the planet was worth and how little effort it would take to simply remove the humans who lived there. The Polite Ones had something the Veilith wanted, and in the Veilith understanding of the universe, wanting something and taking something were exactly the same thing. Humanity had no idea what was coming for them, and they continued to live their peaceful lives on their beautiful colony world, teaching their children that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered. They would soon discover that the universe was also full of monsters who did not care about kindness or friendship or any of the things that humans valued most. The morning started like any other on Ashenvale, with the twin suns rising over the mountains and painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that the colonists never grew tired of watching. Sarah Chun was walking her daughter Emma to school when she noticed the strange lights in the sky, and she stopped on the sidewalk to look up with curiosity rather than fear, because she had lived her whole life in a galaxy where other species were neighbors and friends rather than enemies. "Mommy, what are those?" Emma asked, pointing at the lights that were growing brighter and moving closer with each passing second. Sarah did not know the answer, but something deep in her chest told her that something was very wrong. And she picked up her daughter and started walking faster toward the school where the other children were, gathering 3,000 kilometers away. The planetary governor was receiving an emergency transmission that made his blood run cold, and he read the words on his screen 3 times before he could accept that they were real. The Velith Dominion had sent an ultimatum exactly 30 cycles ago, demanding that all humans abandon Ashenvale within that time period. And they had claimed that the planet belonged to them because of some ancient treaty that no one had ever heard of. The Fourth had responded through diplomatic channels, offering to negotiate and compromise and find a solution that would work for everyone, because that was what humans always did when faced with conflict. The Veilith had not responded to any of these messages, and Earth had assumed that negotiations were ongoing through back channels, that diplomats were working behind the scenes to find a peaceful resolution. They were wrong. The lights that Sarah Chum had seen in the sky were Veilith warships, hundreds of them descending through the atmosphere like a swarm of angry insects. And they were not coming to negotiate. Governor Marcus Webb tried to send a distress signal to Earth, but the Valith had already jammed all communications, cutting off the colony from any hope of outside help. And he realized with horror that over 4 million people were about to face something terrible with no way to call for rescue. All civilians to emergency shelters, he announced over every speaker on the planet, knowing even as he said the words that it would not matter, that there were not enough shelters for everyone, that this was not a drill or a test, but the end of everything they had built. The Valith did not land troops or send negotiators or give any final warning before they started their attack, because they had already decided that humans were not worth the effort of proper conquest. Instead, they simply started killing. Energy weapons rained down from the sky like hellfire, vaporizing buildings and vehicles and people with equal ease. And the screams of 4 million humans rose up into the purple sky that they had once found so beautiful. Sarah Chun died holding her daughter in her arms, never understanding why this was happening, never knowing that her family had been killed over minerals buried deep beneath the surface of their world. The attack lasted 6 hours, though it felt like an eternity to those who lived through the first few minutes before their lives were cut short. Valith soldiers walked through the burning streets, checking for survivors, not to rescue them, but to eliminate them, because their orders were clear and simple and left no room for mercy. Leave none alive, the Valith commander had ordered, so that the other humans understand what happens to those who occupy Valith territory. By the time the twin suns began to set, Ashenvale was silent. The cities that had been built with hope and love were nothing but smoking ruins, and the parks where children had played were graveyards covered in ash. And the schools where young humans had learned about the wonders of the universe were collapsed piles of rubble with small bodies. Buried beneath them, 4,200,000 humans had lived on Ashenvale. When the morning began, and by nightfall, not a single one of them remained alive. The Valith recorded everything. They captured images of the destruction and the death and the horror, and they broadcast this footage across every communication channel in Concord space, making sure that every species in the galaxy could see what had happened. To the polite ones, this is the fate of those who stand against the Dominion, the Valith Lord Commander announced in his message that accompanied the footage. And this is a lesson for all species who might think of challenging our rightful claims in the future. Humanity was given the chance to leave peacefully, and they chose to ignore our generous offer. So they have paid the price for their arrogance. He smiled as he said these words, showing teeth that had been filed to sharp points, and he believed with complete certainty that humanity would now understand their place in the galaxy. Other species watched the footage with mixed reactions that said everything about the nature of the Concord. Some were horrified, though they said nothing because they feared the Valith too much to speak out against such brutality. Others were amused, thinking that the humans had finally learned what everyone else already knew, that kindness was weakness and that the strong would always devour the weak. Few species actually celebrated, raising glasses to toast the humiliation of the humans who had always made them feel uncomfortable with their strange ideas about peace and cooperation. Perhaps now they will stop smiling so much, one ambassador joked at a diplomatic reception, and the aliens around him laughed because they thought the joke was funny on Earth. The news arrived like a physical blow that knocked the breath out of every human who heard it. Families who had children on Ashenvale collapsed in grief, and communities who had sent their best and brightest to build a new life among the stars found themselves planning memorial services instead of celebrating achievements. The United Earth government went into emergency session, and leaders from every nation gathered to discuss what had happened and what should be done in response for 72 hours. Earth was completely silent to the rest of the galaxy. No transmissions, no diplomatic messages, no responses to the many aliens who reached out with condolences that were often more mocking than sincere. The Galactic Concord waited and watched, and wondered what the humans would do next. Though most species believed they already knew the answer, surely the humans would cry and beg and offer tribute to the Valeth in exchange for peace. Because that was what weak species did when they were shown their place in the natural order. Surely the polite ones would become even more polite, bowing their heads and accepting that they had been foolish to ever believe they could be equals in a galaxy ruled by the strong. Some species even prepared to make offers of protection to humanity, planning to take advantage of their grief and fear to gain influence over Earth and its remaining colonies. They had no idea what was actually happening behind the walls of human government buildings, where military officers were dusting off plans that had been created decades ago and never used, where scientists were running calculations that made even them nervous, where leaders were making decisions that would change the course of galactic history forever. The galaxy thought they knew humanity, but they had only ever seen one face of this strange species from a death world. They had seen the smile and the handshake and the offer of friendship. They were about to see something else entirely. The silence from Earth lasted exactly 72 hours. And during that time, the galaxy held its breath without quite understanding why something felt different about this silence. Something that made even the most confident species look over their shoulders, as if they expected to see something terrible standing behind them. The Valeth Lord Commander spent those 3 days accepting congratulations from all eyes and celebrating what he considered to be a perfect military operation, and he gave interviews to galactic news networks, where he explained how the humans had brought this tragedy upon themselves by refusing to leave land that rightfully belonged to his people. "We are not monsters," he said with a straight face during one such interview. "We gave them every opportunity to relocate peacefully, and they chose to ignore our generosity. What happened next was entirely their own fault." Other members of the Galactic Concord nodded along with these words, because this was how the galaxy had always worked, and the strong had always taken from the weak without consequence. Then Earth spoke, and everything changed. The transmission came without warning, broadcast on every frequency that existed, translated into every language known to the Concord, and delivered simultaneously to every species that had access to communication technology anywhere in the galaxy. It was not a plea for mercy, and it was not a request for negotiations, and it was not the weeping surrender that everyone had expected from the polite ones. It was something else entirely. The message began with a single image that filled every screen in the galaxy. A photograph of Ashenvale taken before the attack, showing a city full of life and light and hope, with humans and aliens walking together through streets lined with trees that had been brought from Earth. Then the image shifted to show what that same city looked like now. A crater of ash and rubble where nothing lived and nothing would ever grow again. A human voice began to speak, calm and steady and cold, in a way that made listeners feel as if the temperature had dropped around them. "For 80 years, we chose kindness," the voice said, "and we chose patience, and we chose to believe that the universe would reward decency with decency. We built schools instead of warships, and we sent teachers instead of soldiers, and we thought we could show you a better way." The voice paused, and in that pause was something that the galaxy had never heard from humanity before. Anger, true anger. The kind that burned cold rather than hot. "You showed us what you truly are." Another image appeared, this one of a human child's toy lying in the rubble of what had been a playground, melted and burned, but still recognizable as a small stuffed bear that some little girl had probably loved very much. 4,200,000 of our people are gone. The voice continued. Our families, our children, our future, our dreams. They are gone not because of war and not because of conflict, but because you saw our mercy and called it weakness. The galaxy listened in absolute silence as the message continued. So hear us now. And hear us well. We are done being polite. Those 5 words traveled across the stars at the speed of light. And they hit the galactic concord like a physical force that shattered assumptions that had stood for thousands of years. What comes next is not negotiation, the voice said. And it is not justice, and it is not anything you have ever seen before. What comes next is consequence. You wanted to see what humans become when they stop smiling. And now you will see exactly that. The image on the screen changed again, showing something that made military analysts across the galaxy choke on their drinks and stare with wide eyes at what they were. Seeing it was a fleet, not the small transport ships and cargo vessels that humanity had used for trade, not the unarmed exploration craft that had carried human scientists to study alien worlds, but warships, real warships, the kind that were designed for one purpose and one purpose only. We have watched you, the voice said, and we have learned from you, and we have prepared for the day when your true nature would reveal itself. You thought our kindness meant we were incapable of violence, but you were wrong. The fleet in the image was enormous. Hundreds of ships of designs that no species in the Concord had ever seen before, built with technology that combined human innovation with everything they had learned from 80 years of studying alien engineering for 80 years. We chose not to build these weapons, the voice continued, because we believed they would never be needed, because we hoped that the galaxy was better than its history suggested. We were wrong about that, and our people paid the price for our naivety. The Valeth Lord Commander watched this transmission from his command ship, and for the first time since ordering the attack on Ashenvale, he felt something he had not felt in many years. He felt afraid. This message is addressed to the Valeth Dominion, the voice said, but it is meant for all species in the Galactic Concord, because all of you watched our children die and did nothing. Some of you laughed, and some of you celebrated, and some of you are already planning how to take advantage of our grief. The voice grew colder, harder, more dangerous with each word. To the Vileth, you will answer for what you have done. There will be no negotiations, and there will be no compromise, and there will be no mercy. You murdered 4 million innocent people to steal minerals from beneath their graves. And now you will learn why humanity survived on a death world while other species went extinct. The image shifted one final time, showing the human fleet moving into formation, their engines glowing like stars being born. To the rest of the Concord, remember this moment. Remember that we offered you friendship and you gave us contempt. Remember that we asked for peace and you gave us war. The hand of friendship is still extended, but it is no longer the only hand we offer. The voice paused, and when it spoke again, every word was a promise wrapped in steel. We are coming for the Valeth, and when we are done, you will all understand something very important about humanity. We are not polite because we are weak. We are polite because we know what we are capable of. And we choose not to become the monsters that you always expected us to be. One more pause. Heavy with meaning, but you have forced our hand. And now you will see the truth. Humanity did not evolve on a death world by being gentle. We evolved by being the most dangerous thing on our planet. We are the apex predators of a world that tried to kill us every single day. And we won. The final words of the message echoed across the galaxy. Pray to whatever gods you have, Valeth. We are coming, and we are done being polite. The transmission ended, and the galaxy was left in stunned silence within hours. Intelligence agencies from every major species were working overtime, trying to confirm what the message had shown. Trying to understand how humanity had hidden such military power for so long, what they discovered terrified them. Hidden shipyards and asteroid belts that had been classified as mining operations. Research facilities on moons that had supposedly been abandoned. Weapons factories disguised as manufacturing plants that the Concorde had never bothered to inspect closely. Humanity had been preparing for this possibility since the day they made first contact, hoping they would never need these preparations, but knowing that hope was not a strategy. The Valith Lord Commander ordered his fleet to full alert. Finally understanding that he had made a terrible mistake, he had thought he was teaching a lesson to a weak species. Instead, he had awakened something that should have been left sleeping across the Concorde. Species who had mocked humanity began to remember all the things they had learned about Earth and its people, the endless wars in their history, the weapons they had created and used against each other, the capacity for violence that ran through their blood like fire. The polite ones had never been harmless. They had simply been patient, and now their patience had run out. 6 months after the message was sent, the human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Valith territory, and every sensor in that sector of the galaxy screamed warnings that something massive had arrived. The Valith had used those 6 months to prepare their defenses, gathering the largest military force they had assembled in over 1,000 years, calling in favors from allies and hiring mercenaries from a dozen different species. They had 2,000 warships waiting to crush the human invasion. And their commanders believed with absolute confidence that numbers would win the day, because this was how wars had always been fought in the Concorde. Then they saw what the humans had brought, and confidence turned to confusion, and confusion turned to fear. The human fleet was smaller, just over 200 ships compared to the Valith's 2,000. But the ships themselves were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. At the center of the formation was a ship so massive that it made Valith dreadnoughts look like toys. A mountain of metal and rage that stretched for kilometers in every direction. And written on its hull in letters large enough to be seen from orbit were 4,200,000 names. One for every human who had died on Ashen Vale. Called it the Ashen Vale Remembrance. And it was not just a warship, but a memorial. A promise carved in steel and powered by the fury of an entire species. The Valith Lord Commander studied the enemy fleet and made his calculations, confident that even these strange new ships could not overcome such overwhelming numerical superiority. He was wrong. The Battle of Vareth Prime began when the human fleet moved forward without hesitation, without fear, without any of the caution that military doctrine suggested. When facing a larger enemy force, human pilots flew their ships like extensions of their own bodies, making maneuvers that should have been impossible, predicting Valith tactics before they were even implemented, adapting to every strategy the enemy tried with terrifying speed. The technology gap was immediately apparent to everyone. Watching human weapons tore through Valith shields like they were made of paper, and human shields absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any Concorde warship. And human engines allowed their ships to dance through the battlefield while Valith vessels struggled to keep up. But it was not just technology that made the difference. It was the humans themselves. They fought with a precision and coordination that came from millions of years of evolution on a world where working together was the only way to survive. Where hunting in packs had made their ancestors the masters of an entire planet, every human pilot knew what their wingmates were going to do before they did it. And every gunner anticipated enemy movements with instincts honed by countless generations of predators. And every captain commanded their crew with the calm certainty of a species that had never known how to give up. The Valith broke first. Their formations crumbled as ship after ship was destroyed or disabled, and their communications channels filled with screams and pleas for help that no one could answer. And their proud warriors discovered that they had never truly understood what war meant until they faced humanity in battle 9 hours after it began. The Battle of Vareth Prime was over. The Valith had lost over 1,800 warships, with the survivors fleeing in every direction. Their fleet scattered and broken beyond any hope of recovery. The humans had lost 12 ships. The mathematics of that victory spread across the Concord like wildfire, and species who had dismissed humanity as harmless suddenly found themselves reviewing every assumption they had ever made about the polite ones. But the humans were not finished in the weeks that followed. UN forces systematically dismantled the Valith military machine, hunting down every warship, every military station, every weapons factory and training facility and defensive platform in Valith space. Human soldiers landed on Valith worlds, and they fought with the same terrifying effectiveness that their ships had shown in space, clearing fortified positions that had been designed to be impregnable and defeating enemies who outnumbered them 10-1. The Valith discovered something that historians had known for centuries, but the galaxy had forgotten. Humans were endurance predators, built to chase their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, and they simply did not stop no matter how many forces the Valith threw at them, no matter how many ambushes they set or traps they laid. The humans kept coming, relentless and unstoppable, and absolutely merciless in their pursuit of those who had killed their people. The Lord Commander tried to rally his forces, tried to give speeches about honor and courage and the glory of dying for the Dominion, but his words fell on deaf ears because his soldiers had seen what humanity could do, and they wanted no part of it. 3 months after the Battle of Vareth Prime, the Valith Dominion had no military left. Every warship was destroyed or captured. Every military base was a smoking ruin, and every officer who had participated in the planning or execution of the Ashenvale massacre had been hunted down and brought to justice. And yet, something strange had happened during those 3 months of war, something that confused the Galactic Concord almost as much as humanity's military prowess. The humans had not touched. Valith civilian schools on Valith worlds still stood, untouched by human weapons, and hospitals continued to operate without interference, and homes and farms and markets went about their business while war raged around them. When human soldiers encountered non-combatants, they did not harm them. Instead, they offered medical aid to the wounded. They shared food with the hungry, and they treated every civilian with the same respect that humans showed to each other. A Concord journalist asked a human general why they were being so careful with civilian populations when the Valith had shown no such mercy to the people of Ashenvale. General's answer was simple and spoke to something fundamental about humanity. "We are not them," she said, "and we refuse to become them. We did not come here to murder children or burn cities or teach innocent people to fear us. We came to make sure that the Valith can never threaten anyone again, and when that is done, we will leave these people in peace." She paused and looked at the journalist with eyes that had seen too much death and carried too much grief. "The monsters who ordered the attack on Ashenvale will face justice," she continued, "and the military that carried out their orders will be destroyed. But the Valith children who had no part in those decisions will grow up safe and free. That is the difference between us and them, and it is the most important difference in the universe." The Valith Lord Commander was captured in the final days of the war, hiding in a bunker beneath his own palace, surrounded by guards who had abandoned him when the human soldiers arrived. He expected to be tortured, to be made an example of, to suffer the same fate that he had inflicted on the people of Ashenvale instead. He was given a trial, a real trial with evidence and witnesses, and the opportunity to defend himself, because humans believed in justice even when dealing with those who had shown them none. He was found guilty by a court that included representatives from dozens of species, many of whom had once considered him an ally, and he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison, watching recordings of the Ashenvale massacre every single day so that he would never forget what he had done. The Valith Dominion, which had ruled a significant portion of the galaxy for over 10,000 years, ceased to exist as a military power in less than 6 months, and humanity, the species that had been mocked as the polite ones, had proven something that the galaxy would never forget. That true strength was not about cruelty or conquest or the ability to destroy, but about the choice of when and how and why to use the power you possessed. They had won the war, but they had not become monsters in the process. That was their greatest victory of all. The great chamber of the Galactic Concord had never been so quiet as it was on the day that humanity sent its ambassador to address the collected species of none. Space representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in their designated seats. Beings of every shape and size imaginable. Creatures that breathed methane, and creatures that swam through liquid metal, and creatures that existed partially in dimensions that humans could not perceive. All of them were afraid. The war against the Valith had shown them what humanity was capable of, and now they waited to learn what price they would have to pay for their silence during the Ashenvale massacre, for their mockery of the polite ones, for their failure to stand against obvious evil when standing would have mattered. Many expected demands for territory or resources or submission to human authority, because that was what conquering species always demanded. And humanity had proven beyond any doubt that they could take whatever they wanted. The doors of the chamber opened, and a single human walked in, and every eye and sensor and perception organ in the room focused on her with terrified intensity. She was small by human standards, with gray hair and wrinkled skin that spoke of advanced age, and she walked with a slight limp that made her seem fragile and harmless, but everyone in that chamber knew better than to be fooled by appearances, because this was the species that had destroyed the Valeth Dominion in less time than most wars took to begin. Her name was Margaret Chun, and she was the grandmother of Sarah Chun, who had died holding her daughter Emma on a street in Ashenvale. While strange lights fell from the sky, she reached the podium at the center of the chamber and looked out at the assembled representatives with eyes that held grief and anger and something else that took a moment to recognize. It was disappointment. "You are afraid," she said, and her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "And that is good, because you should be afraid. You watched our people die and did nothing. And some of you cheered, and some of you laughed, and some of you are still trying to figure out how to profit from our tragedy." The representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and several of them could not meet her gaze. "But we did not come here to threaten you," she continued. "And we did not come here to demand your submission or your territory or your wealth. We came here to explain something that you need to understand." She activated a holographic display, and suddenly the chamber was filled with images of Ashenvale before the attack. Children playing in parks, families sharing meals, aliens and humans working together to build something beautiful. "This is what we wanted," she said. "And this is what we still want. Peace and community and a galaxy where no one has to bury their children because a stronger species decided they were inconvenient." The images shifted to show the current state of former Valith military installations, reduced to rubble and slag by human weapons. "But make no mistake about what we are willing to do to protect that dream," she said. "Because we will never be victims again. Not us, and not anyone who stands under our protection. The price of our kindness is respect. Not fear, but respect. And if you give us that respect, then you will find no better friends anywhere in the universe." She paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who had openly mocked humanity in the past. "We are still the same people who sent you music and poetry," she said. "And we still believe in diplomacy and cooperation and building something better together. The hand of friendship is still extended to every species that wants to take it." Her eyes hardened, and suddenly she did not look like a fragile old woman. anymore, but like something ancient and dangerous and absolutely certain of its own power. But it is no longer the only hand we offer. She let those words settle over the chamber like a weight. We will not seek revenge against species who failed to help us, she continued, because revenge is a poison that destroys those who drink it. And we will not become the thing we fought against. But we will remember who stood with us and who stood against us. And we will remember who laughed while our children died. She pointed to the images of HFY still floating in the air. 4,200,000 names are written on the hull of our flagship, she said. And those names will never be forgotten. Every human who serves on that ship has memorized at least one of those names. And they carry that memory with them wherever they go. Because memory is how we honor the dead. The chamber was absolutely silent. So here is what we propose, she said. Not as conquerors, but as members of this community that we have always wanted to belong to. We will work with any species that wants to build a safer galaxy. One where what happened to HFY can never happen again. She smiled. And it was the same warm smile that humans had always offered to the galaxy. But now everyone understood what that smile meant. We will share our technology with those who prove themselves worthy of trust, she continued. And we will defend the weak against the strong. And we will stand as proof that power does not have to corrupt and that strength does not have to be used for evil. She turned off the holographic display and looked out at the assembled representatives one final time. The choice is yours, she said. And you can choose fear if you want, cowering in your corners and waiting for the humans to come and destroy you the way we destroyed the Valith. Or you can choose friendship, working alongside us to build something that will last for 1,000,000 years. She began walking toward the exit. But she stopped at the door and turned back. One more thing, she said. My granddaughter Sarah and my great-granddaughter Emma died on HFY. They were killed because someone saw our kindness and thought it meant we were safe to attack. Her voice did not waver as she spoke these words. I want you all to know that I forgive the Valith civilians for what their leaders did, she said. Because holding on to hatred would only dishonor the memory of my family. But I also want you to know that if anyone ever threatens human lives again, if anyone ever thinks that they can murder our children without consequence, they will discover that forgiveness does not mean we forget. She walked out of the chamber, leaving the Galactic Concord to make its choice in the centuries that followed. Humanity became something the galaxy had never seen before. A guardian species, protectors of the weak, defenders of those who could not defend themselves. Human fleets patrolled the borders of Concord space, and human soldiers trained the militaries of species that had once been helpless. And human diplomats worked tirelessly to resolve conflicts before they could turn into the kind of violence that had destroyed HFY, built schools on 100 worlds, and shared medical technology that saved billions of lives and created art that moved beings to tears in languages that had no word for beauty. Before they heard human music, but everyone remembered the lesson of the Valith, and everyone understood that behind the smiles and the handshakes and the offers of friendship was a species that would never forget. What had been done to them historians would later call this period the Pax Humana, the human peace, and it would last for longer than any empire the galaxy had ever known. Because humanity had finally found its place among the stars. Not as conquerors or victims, but as something the universe had always needed and never known it was missing. A species that chose kindness first, but was ready to be something else when kindness failed. The polite ones were still polite. After all, they just were not only polite anymore, and the galaxy was better for it. Even if they had learned that lesson in the hardest way possible, on the anniversary of the HFY massacre, every human in the galaxy observed a moment of silence, and every ship in the human fleet flew with lights dimmed, And every child learned the names of the dead so that their memory would live forever. They had built a better future from the ashes of tragedy. And they had done it without losing their souls in the process. That was the true victory. The one that mattered more than any battle or any war. They had proven that it was possible to be strong and kind at the same time. To use power for protection rather than conquest. To remember without being consumed by hatred, and somewhere in the stars. In a place that no sensor could detect and no ship could reach. The spirits of 4,200,000 humans watched over the galaxy they had died for. Knowing that their sacrifice had not been in vain, humanity had learned its lesson. And the universe had learned something too. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Because the kindest beings are often the ones who have the most strength to restrain, and humans had never been good at restraint. Once someone hurt their family, that was a lesson the galaxy would never need to learn again.